All ready to go. All right, everybody. Welcome to the GIS Peer Success webinar. This is episode number 10. We finally hit double digits. And today's title is The Tale of Two GIS Smart Cities. I am your host, Toby Soto of GISSuccess.com, which is a GIS leadership and management resource website with blog, vlog, online courses, and downloadable content to help you make a successful journey as a GIS professional. And this episode is sponsored by GISSuccess.com. The online course, How to Take Your GIS Team from Good to Great. It's a course designed to improve your GIS leadership skills by focusing on three key elements, which are relationships, GIS roadmap, and staff skills. And by using a GIS framework or model to develop a GIS staff skill development plan to raise productivity and morale, ultimately giving you the freedom to pursue more meaningful GIS tasks. So if this sounds good to you, go to GISSuccess.com and click on the ad on the homepage. I did have a LinkedIn contest, which was to gain free access to that course, and I'll be announcing the winner at the end of this episode, so stay tuned. We have a large audience today. We had originally 62 people signed up for the webinar, and a lot more people are gaining on as we speak. So if this is your first time watching the GIS Peer Success webinar, a huge thank you for your time and joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our co-hosts. We'll start out with Tim. You want to introduce yourself and any announcements you have?
Yeah, my name's Tim Nolan. I work at Collin County, have been here a long time. I worked here when my beard was tiny and dark. I had hair on my head, so I've been here a while. The things that we do here, I spent a lot of time trying to integrate our GIS team with our app dev and records group. That's part of all of our applications. And just trying to put things together for our citizens to have access to. The way we look at it is the best way for us to give back and be transparent is to provide the data that the citizens here have already paid for. So we spend a lot of effort on public-facing applications and really get to enjoy how we can show off our GIS prowess as well as some of the other tools that we have. And we're an agile shop here, so we do things in increments every 2 weeks. We try to get out something for folks to have access to. All right.
Awesome.
What about you, Wade?
Hi, I'm Wade Kloos. I'm the Director of Enterprise Systems for the Utah Department of Natural Resources. I've been here for about 5.5 years. I would say one of my major focal points is to ensure that GIS winds up being leveraged as much as possible throughout the enterprise. We're adopting best practices and really getting a return on investment for all of our GIS-oriented investments. So that's what I've been focusing on.
Awesome. So a little housekeeping real quick. We do have chat capability on this Zoom. So when you go ahead and chat in there, make sure it goes to all panelists and participants. So that way we can all see your comments. We will be monitoring that along the way. So we'll be trying to answer any questions you guys have. Also, if you haven't already, join our Slack group. That is something that was in the email that you first received when you joined this webinar. There's an access link there. That's where we continue our conversations in there. There's a lot of great resources, a lot of good information that people post in there. So join the community. And then if you want future notifications about these upcoming webinars, you can go to GISSuccess.com and sign up for the newsletter down in the sidebar. So that's it for those announcements. And so today's webinar is about the tale of two GIS smart cities. And we have two very special guests with us today. I'm going to go ahead and let Matt introduce himself, and then we'll roll into Kjeld, and we'll have him introduce, and then we'll go into our presentations. So go ahead and introduce yourself, Matt.
All right, thanks, Toby. Thanks for having me. So my name is Matt Pietryszyn, and I am one of the team leads on our location intelligence and data visualization team here at the City of Brampton, which is a large town or a large city outside of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, just to the west. And so I am one of the team leads of this quite a large GIS team for the municipality. And my team spends a lot of our time, unleashing the data, influencing the staff here to open up their data internally, as well as making it available outside the organization. Yeah, I've been at the city for 15 years, and you can visit our open data portal at geohub.ca.
Awesome, perfect. And you, Kjeld?
Yeah, so I will talk just a little bit more about why I get to be here and present to you when I actually am presenting. But very quickly, I am fairly new to both GIS and the smart cities industry generally. So I started and ran a smart city program for City of Redlands for a couple of years, and that was actually my first encounter with GIS. Fortunately, I like to think I learned quickly, so we did quite a bit with it in the time that I was there. I've since switched over to the private side and am working on the industry side of a project I started while I was running the smart city program, which has to do with smart traffic management, and that's V2X and AI and all that cool stuff.
Awesome, great. I really appreciate you guys being here. I've met you guys along the way, and to be able to have a venue like this, to be able to continue these discussions and share these moments with the community is hugely beneficial. And you guys have really shown a lot of progress in the Smart Cities initiative, and it takes a lot of effort to get to where you're at, and there's a lot of pressure on a lot of us GIS managers to be smart and embrace the smart cities and be innovative. And so I'd love for you guys to be able to share some of your experiences to help bring other managers insights and things that they should be looking for and avoiding or performing in order to get the most out of this Smart Cities initiative. So if you want to go ahead and start, Matt, with your presentation. The way we'll do this is Matt will do his presentation. We'll automatically roll into Kjeld's presentation. Then after that, we'll open it up to Q&A and to chat, and we'll just do our roundtable discussion. So if you have any questions along the way, just key them into the Q&A or into chat, and we'll monitor that along the way. So go ahead, Matt.
All right, thanks very much again. So my presentation is going to be very much focused on what we've been doing at the City of Brampton with regards to open data and how that leads to a smarter city. So a lot of what my discussion is going to be external facing. I do touch on a little bit about how we leverage that inside as well. So just want to check that my screen is shared. Everyone can see the opening slide?
Yep, you're good.
All right. Hold 1 second here. And you can still see the opening slide? Can't hear Tim.
See your notes now.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
All right, let's switch that up. This was working 10 minutes ago. All right, what can you see now?
You. We don't see your presentation.
Yeah, there's no presentation.
You don't want to see me.
Technology.
Hey, well, Matt's figuring that out. In chat, how many of you are responsible for performing some sort of smart cities initiative in your city, county, or your agency? I'm just kind of curious. You guys can put that in.
How's that?
Yep.
Yeah,
good.
better.
All right. So I mentioned it in my introduction. Brampton's a large municipality in Ontario, Canada. We're just west of Toronto. And we also have a very young city. The average age of the population is 36 and a half versus the national average in Canada of 41. And then 42% of our population are under 29 years old. So Brampton, we're positioned right between two large tech centers, Waterloo and Toronto. And so when you want to build this worthwhile engagement initiative with residents and businesses, visitors and customers, it's important to understand those demographics so you can help, they help define the types of activities and engagement techniques that you use. So smart cities mean many different things to different people, but we feel that smart cities are built with open data. They're built with transparency and public engagement with this goal to improve the lives of our residents. We think that the municipalities can tap into their unused department, which is that community. So through different initiatives like our most recent Brampton 2040 vision, the city wants to enable communities to influence the design of their neighborhoods and to make them more culturally diverse and authentic. So our GeoHub, which is our open data portal, provides us with a strong framework for future development and an increased two-way data sharing communication. But then again, that open data doesn't just benefit the public, it's also an incredible way to break down silos across departments at the city to allow for more efficient access to city data in a central location. And so as part of our smart city vision, the Brampton GeoHub is a gateway for staff and community engagement. It's this central location for everyone to discover authoritative data analysis and visualization tools. And so currently the hub's four main focuses are apps, maps, stories, and open data, with a very heavy emphasis on the data aspect. And we ensure that everything available on the GeoHub is built with as much open data as we can, and it's all available to then view and analyze and download. And so in order for us to distribute GIS capabilities across the organization and to get as many staff as possible working with this authoritative data and then creating their own data products, we're launching our Geo Portal. And it's going to be our internal companion to the GeoHub, where staff can discover data, where they're going to be able to create dashboards as a business capability on their own, and then perform analysis and then collaborate those data products and share that content with their teams, and then collaborate that up with the external service providers and to help us become as open as possible while building more geo-literacy across the corporation. So our open data portal has gone through an evolution since its launch in 2011. When we first launched open data, we had very minimal data available. In the beginning, we added 15 data sets from our GIS database. With those, we were only reaching a very small amount of people, and they were our open data enthusiasts. But we wanted to show the value of open data to a wider audience. So we started to grow the platform, and we started to incorporate more open data into stories and into all of the maps and web applications that we built. And with that step in 2017, the launch of the GeoHub, it moved us into this first level of engagement maturity. And since then, we've expanded the open data portal, and like I said, rebranded it as the GeoHub in 2017. And it's now become a globally known central location for both public and city staff to find the maps, app stories, and open data. And we share data visualization tools and examples of how people can incorporate the data into their analysis, building reporting capabilities. And now we've got over 300 data sets on the GeoHub, and we're going to keep growing that, ensuring that we keep pushing out purposeful and valuable data. So began to take our GeoHub on the road and started to promote its use at various engagement events, such as hackathons, planning charrettes, IT road shows, and other city events. We would hold seminars, and we'd help the staff and public understand the value of sharing and using open data. And as we begin to publish open data collected through various engagement activities, which I'll talk about shortly, we move further along the engagement maturity path into an engagement phase. So the next step in the maturity of Brampton's GeoHub is to further extend the reach of our data and tools into the neighborhoods and community groups in Brampton to allow residents and service providers and city staff to share their perspectives and to gather and share more data and more information to help build out a more complete local government that's perpetually in collaboration with its citizens. And the opportunity is to leverage that community as an intelligent and capable augmentation to our government workforce. And this continuous two-way engagement with the public is, we think, absolutely key to Brampton's success as a smart city. So we'll continue to foster these collaborative approaches across many internal and external initiatives. And we'll continue to create and share data for the good of all our staff and citizens. So that means through 2019, when we focus on these initiatives, we'll get into this new phase of our maturity, when we start aligning our open data and engagement activities with our city's strategic plan. And that'll allow us to move towards the final phase of our open data maturity with two-way data sharing. And so the next few examples demonstrate how we at the city can take advantage of our own open data on the GeoHub, as well as other baking and other external data sources. So like a lot of municipalities, they've entered a partnership with Waze. So we've done that, and we share our road construction projects and road closures as open data. And Waze is able to consume that and for the benefit of all of the travelers through Brampton, so they can avoid where roads close down. They can, it helps reduce the congestion and traffic volume across the city. And then in turn, we can consume a data feed from Waze of traffic volumes and alerts that we can start building into internal operations dashboards for our traffic services. And then using that information, you could see multiple benefits across the city, where the traffic division can help adjust traffic lights based on that real-time traffic potentially. Planning department would be able to analyze incident volume data for better understanding of the impact of current driving trends. So Trava is like a big enthusiast app and allows people to record and share their riding activity. When we overlay Brampton's trails with Strava crowdsourced data, we can quickly see where trails align with our planned trails and where riders have found more efficient ways to bike around. And that could be due to heavy road traffic or accident-prone intersections or connecting streets that were overlooked in our planning. We've released a dashboard, a city dashboard on the GeoHub, and what that does is it reshares data from other trusted agencies like Statistics Canada and other regional agencies. So we use it so Brampton staff and residents can benefit from knowing where to find Brampton-specific stats and measures. Then the 2040 vision engagement data. This is bright ideas and priorities, which I'll talk about later. They're captured in surveys and then shared back to the community to support the narrative in our strategic plan and game changer initiatives. Now switching to how we've seen some of the public leverage our open data. TransC is a transit prediction web app. It supports Toronto TTC, New York MTA, LA Metro, and other agencies. This app is developed by a local entrepreneur And it consumes Brampton's real-time and static transit data through GTFS. And it predicts whether a bus will be late or on time based on current speeds and location and previous schedules. We've seen that a research company performed some analysis related to the design and function of Canadian urban regions using our planning data on the GeoHub. We spend a lot of time working with local high school students, showing them how to discover and use Brampton open data in their assignments. Our greenhouse gas emissions and energy consumption data, it's pretty interesting data for students to explore and offer suggestions to decrease emissions at our city facilities. And along with working directly with teachers and students in the classroom, we also work with different organizations that bring together students and residents to help solve problems with creative solutions at hackathons. And aside from the hackathons, we also engage with local startups and show them how they can leverage this authoritative city data to help them plan business activities and locate within Brampton. So the team here, the GIS team, our location intelligence team, along with the Smart City team, has been building partnerships across the different divisions at the organization. And so some of the main ones are with economic development and bylaw enforcement and the planning team. A key partnership we developed is with strategic communications. We work very closely with them and ensure that all of our messaging is clear and the design is clean and cohesive across the entire platform. We ensure that that a specific division's communication advisor reviews and helps to craft those stories that we share on the GeoHub. It was also a really big priority for us to work with strategic communications and show them how our tools could help improve processes and to help to tell the city's stories or the business units' stories. You know, once we could bring them in and help them understand, then they could go out to the business as ambassadors to spread the word. So our planning vision for smart growth, strong communities, and a very bold vision for 2040, the Brampton 2040 vision. In 2017, the city began this journey to harness this potential and think bigger about Brampton's future. So as a city, we undertook this intensive community-wide conversation, and it was the largest engagement exercise that the city had ever done. Initially with over 11,000 responses, and all those responses are available on our GeoHub as open data. And out of those responses, we were able to get a bunch of themes and sub-themes from those from that engagement exercise. So the main ones were transit, culture and arts, entertainment, and parks and recreation. Those were the common themes, and we used them to prioritize this ambitious vision, this document for the future of Brampton. So we had asked residents to also share their bright ideas for Brampton's growth and development. And thousands of people of all ages and backgrounds, they shared their dreams and what they loved about Brampton, what we could do better, and what they wished we had here and where. So we used that information and we created this bold vision for Brampton's future. And so we took all that information and data that we gathered and we built a story map that we released as well that you can check out on the GeoHub. The next big initiative that we're going to support with Open Data, the City of Brampton, and two-way data collaboration, is our community safety plan. And we're going to be working very closely with the Emergency Management Office and the community safety team. And we're going to build out another large engagement exercise where we partner with external service providers and we'll be sharing information and data back and forth through that platform. And just to show and to further demonstrate Brampton's commitment to transparency and accountability, in partnership with our corporate performance and innovation team, we released version 1 of our city dashboard, which you can find on the GeoHub. And the dashboard groups measures into 6 themes and gives a snapshot of services and strategic goals and community conditions. Each measure includes a status and some graph, and then a narrative around why this measurement is important and how that relates back to the citizens. And so in order to continue to improve on our program, we need to track our progress and maturity. So we're going to be developing our open data strategy, which will include the use of maturity modeling, similar to how we do for our full enterprise GIS program, using tools like the Slim Jim maturity model, the Geospatial Maturity Index, and the Open Cities Index. And we're going to continue to keep creating partnerships across the corporation as well as with outside agencies to influence them to open up their data and share it on the GeoHub. We also just launched our School of Open Data internally, which is a monthly session where we invite staff in to understand how they can take advantage of the tools in open data that's available to them. And then in May, we have our first public-facing class for School of Open Data, which we've partnered with the public library. And I just want to leave the last slide up for some of the testimonials. And they're kind of a diverse group, just to show and share that it's really important to get out of your office and talk to people around the organization. So and that's it.
Awesome. That was really cool. I think you guys can see why we brought Matt on to this webinar. You guys have done some amazing stuff. You know, I never knew you guys started in 2011. So you guys have been at this for 7 years. That's a long time. You know, and I can tell you guys have really cultivated a lot of information, a lot of ideas, and you know, I'll get into my questions later, but because I do have some for you. And so I want to give time to now Kjeld.
Yeah, thank you.
So Matt, you'll have to unshare your screen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of that. There we go.
Awesome.
Everybody see this okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Fantastic. So my name's Kjeld Lindsted. I ran a smart city program for a little while, which is how I ran into Toby, and I'm currently on the private side, as I mentioned a minute ago. So how did I get here? Which I like to tell just in brief, because it's such a, I think it's an unusual path, and it always interests me how people end up where they are. And you know, my dad was an academic, taught at university for a lot of years, and I have sort of I'm always drawn to that side of life. And so I want to help anybody who's maybe on here, who's thinking about somebody who's trying to figure out how do you get into these kinds of fields. So I have a bachelor's degree in political science, spent a long time in college trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Ultimately wound up in law school, did very well, but did not want to practice. And since then have continued to sort of shift around all over the place. So a little bit of nonprofit fundraising for Make-A-Wish. I ran a couple of political campaigns here locally in Southern California. So kind of all over the place, ultimately ended up at City of Redlands, and I came on to do transportation grant writing and some budget management type stuff. So it was like bike and pedestrian lanes, things like that. And that ultimately found us the funding. I was successful in a couple of those grant applications, and that got us the funding that we needed to launch our Smart City program. So it grew out of that. I stayed with that for close to 3 years, and then just a couple of months ago left the city, and through a couple of hops actually ended up working for one of the vendors that I brought in from when I was on the agency side, and I'll get to that project in just a second. So I'm going to tell just a slightly different story than Matt. It's really interesting, Matt, to see the evolution of your program and sort of how far you've come. I've seen other agencies who are doing things very similar to yours, and I want to say that it was always aspirational for me. So the Smart City program that I ran, we didn't have time to get it where yours is. But yours, something like what you do was always the goal for me and for my project. So it's really cool that, to sort of be on this side presenting and be associated with people like you who've sort of achieved what I always thought was like the end vision. So that's very cool. So we launched our Smart City program out of some funding that we got for transportation projects. I wrote a grant early on with the city to do emergency vehicle preemption. So trying to get fire trucks and ambulances and police vehicles through green lights faster. We were successful in that grant. When we originally wrote the funding or the application for that project, we were envisioning a very traditional approach, which is you install a sensor on the vehicle, you install a sensor at the traffic signal, they talk to each other, and when the fire truck shows up at a red light, they can call for a green. It's a very sort of straightforward application of it. But after we got the funding and we started looking at, what kind of a vendor do we want to bring in, how do we actually implement on this program, and we realized that there was a much bigger opportunity, and it kind of opened our eyes to this whole concept of a smart city, that you could use, these colloquial terms like AI or big data, data-driven decision-making, that you could sort of do more with what you had. And so we very quickly pivoted not only that project, but the entire role that I played at the city into how do we build from scratch this much more intelligent, much more interesting program. So it started in transportation, but it quickly grew into a number of different things. I think at the peak, we had like 18 different major project areas. So it was everything from sensors to measure soil moisture at the parks to make sure we watered appropriately, to some IoT strategies around some flooding issues that the city had. Obviously the transportation project, but then also more interesting probably to this group was a bunch of GIS applications. So City of Redlands is the hometown for the Esri Corporation, which had a number of advantages and some interesting drawbacks I'll get to in a minute, but it gave us an opportunity to work really closely with the Esri developers and the leadership team at Esri to envision how does a company like Esri take some of their cutting edge products and implement those in a city that's willing to sort of be flexible and try some new things. So the program that we built was really designed around this concept of innovation in city government, which I think is really interesting because, we talk a lot about innovation and we sort of deify startups. I actually work for a startup today, so I don't want to bash them too much, but there's this idea that there should have always a better way. But I think sometimes what that ends up looking like, especially inside a city, is a sort of bolt-on innovation, right? So we take a project that or some business process that already exists. Let's say it's a permit application process, and maybe the traditional way somebody fills out a paper application and they walk in and they hand it over the counter to somebody who processes the application and takes a check from them or something like this. So then in innovation, I think a lot of times what ends up happening is we see that as the process, the way it's supposed to be. And so then we try to take that process and somehow make it digital or electronic. So maybe instead of that PDF form that they fill out, we create a form online or something like that, and now they can email it in, or there's some software they submit it through. Maybe they make their payment with a credit card instead of a check. And then we pat ourselves on the back and we say, good day, that the job's done. When we started looking at our program, we saw a lot of those kinds of opportunities. City of Redlands is technologically fairly far behind. I don't mean that as a slight, but it's kind of a quiet city and really didn't have a need to push a lot of these digital tools. And so we missed kind of that interim period as a city where a lot of cities were switching to digitizing some of these processes. And so we had an opportunity to go from a very analog process sort of all the way to what's cutting edge and what's modern. And so we had to ask ourselves, what would any of these processes that we're working on, what would they look like if we built them from scratch today? So setting aside for just a minute sort of the way the process looks right now, how would we get it all the way to a modern paradigm and not just sort of add little incremental improvements? So I think a really good example of that that's specific to the GIS space is we colloquially call them water cops, but we had water waste investigators who would go out, and we had some regulations in the city around water waste. Obviously, California's been in a drought for quite a while, and so there's a lot of water conservation measures both at the state level and the city level. So we had a team that was responsible for enforcing that in the community. And it was a very paper-driven, very manual data entry type process. So they would drive around physically, they would spot violations of these water regulations, they'd log it on a paper form, they'd bring all those paper forms back to the office and type them up into a spreadsheet, sort of one line at a time, and then attach some photos. And then mailers get put together also as a manual process and sent out, and somebody's folding all the envelopes and all that. So it's really a labor-intensive process to achieve what's essentially just slapping fines on people. It really wasn't. The people who ran the process worked very hard to make it customer friendly, but as a process, it really wasn't. There was no way for you as a citizen to have any insight into what was happening other than you know, a letter shows up in the mail that says, hey, we spotted a violation and here's what you need to do about it. So what we did is we worked with the GIS team that we had in the city, and we worked with, we actually, it was kind of an interesting situation. So our GIS team was really good, but they didn't have the capacity to do all of these kinds of things we wanted to do under the Smart City program. And so we reached out to actually some neighboring cities that had developed a model around their GIS team where they actually outsourced some of their teams. So they had sort of overbuilt the team and then would outsource to other cities like a consulting service, but you know, at cost. And so it was a really cost-effective way for us to augment our GIS team. So working between these two, we used the Azure platform to put together a whole suite of stuff around these process that these water crops go through. So, you know, a collector tool in the field for the guys to enter the data directly into the database instead of filling out a paper form, and then some other tools on the back end using that data to automate the like lettering process. And the end goal was something like what Matt City has done in this very like public facing portal. We never quite got there during the time that I was with the city, but the process that we did develop was actually quite effective. So we took probably half of one staff person's time and turned it into a digital process that was very efficient. And it was really interesting because it did a couple of things. So on one level, it saved a ton of money. So I think between the different savings that we got from some various components that we were able to digitize, we got something like $80,000 a year in salary savings, which was huge, but it didn't come at the expense of getting rid of a staff person. It actually saved us a staff person. So what had happened was the person who was at the time responsible for this process of managing these water waste investigators and did most of the data entry around this, she was really hired as like a conservation expert. Can't remember exactly what it was that she had her background in, but she wanted to work on water efficiency problems from like at a policy level, and was ended up stuck, you know, sitting in the office writing data into a spreadsheet for like half of her week. And she was right on the cusp, which we didn't discover till after the fact, but she was right on the cusp of actually leaving the city to go to do some more interesting work. And nobody could blame her for that. And so when we took this half of the job that she really didn't care to do, and nobody should have to do this kind of data entry in today's world, we automated it using these GIS tools, and then we're able to free up the rest of her time to actually get back to policy work, and we're able to keep her on staff as a result. So it was really kind of a cool outcome, and it was kind of a poster child for the Smart City program that we ran, because we'd saved so much money from just this one very narrow use case, and also done quite a bit of like employee engagement around it. So it was really, I think, a big success story. I want to talk just a little bit. I'm going to pivot here, and I'll sort of come back to the Smart Redlands program in just a second, but I'm going to pivot slightly to what it looks like working inside the public sector. And this probably is very familiar to most of you. I imagine most people here work in an agency, but I bring it up for a reason, which I'll get to in just a second. So now from the outside, so I mentioned I've since left the Smart City program and now work on the private side for a company called NoTraffic, which does traffic management. It's actually around the Signal project I kicked off when I was with the city, which I'll explain in a second. But city staff have sort of little risk for, or little incentive, I should say, to take risks. And I think the reason for that is, at least in my experience as a city staff person, if you take a risk as a staffer and things work out really well, it's not like you're going to get bonuses or stock options or something like that, like you might get on the private side, or even a pay raise necessarily. It's probably that you're going to get a pat on the back. Somebody's going to tell you good job, and you're going to feel good that you did something. And there's value to that, don't get me wrong. But the flip side of it is, if you, let's say you implement a new software package and the whole thing falls apart, it costs a lot of money, it doesn't work, and it's upsetting residents and these kinds of things. And now you have people, maybe people from the community in complaining to council that city wasted money on this project that didn't work, or they don't like the results, it's frustrating for them. So, you know, maybe losing your job is extreme, but you're in trouble, right? Like, nobody wants to be in that position. I think the worst possible outcome for a city staff member is to have members of the community in front of council complaining about the work that you do. That's sort of the worst nightmare. So given that scenario, it's difficult to expect staff people at large to take the kinds of risks that we need to get to the innovation concept that I mentioned a minute ago, which is, what would you do if you built it today? So it's very easy to sort of innovate incrementally. It's not easy, I shouldn't say it's easier, to innovate incrementally, because you can kind of build onto the processes as they exist today. It's much harder, it's much more risk intensive to take the process and say, you know, I understand that's how it's been done, but, you know, because we have these new technologies, we're able to now reimagine what that process should look like. So it falls to leadership positions inside city government to empower that kind of innovation. And what I mean by that is, if you're afraid to fail as a staff person, then you're really afraid to try. There's not much you can do if you can't accept that there's some risk of failure. But I don't think it's fair to put that risk of failure on like line staff people who, you know, mouths to feed and whatever the situation is. But I think as you climb the ladder inside city government, if you're the kind of person who wants to see innovation happen, you're going to have to take that risk on yourself. So I was fortunate in the beginning to work for a department director. We actually worked, my project was run out of like an engineering public works department, kind of a hybrid. And I had a public works director who really wasn't afraid to fail. He created this safe space for the staff that worked, you know, all across the department, but in particular in these innovation programs. And I wasn't the only person working on this. So sort of all of us had this freedom to try new things, to propose new ideas, certainly an intellectual freedom, intellectual safety to propose changes, even major ones, you know, to the way the organization operated. And those ideas were taken seriously, and we would hash through, you know, whether or not they were economically viable, et cetera. But nobody was afraid to bring things up. We would push, we would try new things, we'd have little pilot projects for stuff. But that really rested heavily on leadership. They shouldered that risk, and I actually didn't understand the extent to which that was true until some leadership changes came about, and the director that I worked for ultimately ended up leaving the city. So, which brings me sort of back to the Smart City program that I ran. So it's not an accident that I'm no longer working for the city. It was a choice, but not an accident. So what ended up happening was the director that I worked for, because the projects were super successful and in many ways started getting public attention. So we had newspaper articles that were coming out about the work that we were doing. We were working with Esri, and so we had some attention from Esri leadership. And it got a little bit political. So Esri had some other interests inside the city. They own a lot of land in the city, so they had development interests that they were also having to sort of tend to. And then the city manager was in a position where he'd been there for a very long time. He'd been brought into the city to solve some financial problems related to the financial crisis in 2008. And so he'd really built his reputation on financial management, wasn't really a tech person. And so this sort of director that I worked for ended up being kind of a rising star at the executive level with some public attention. And that created conflict, unfortunately. And so my director and the city manager finally had a falling out. My director left. Ironically, the city manager didn't last much longer either. I doubt anybody's seen the news out of Redlands. It's a fairly small city, but city manager actually was let go by the council for some not very pleasant reasons. So it was kind of unfortunate the way the whole thing sort of unraveled at the end. And I think that I mention it because I have no interest in sort of bad mouthing the city or anyone that works there. I still have very close relationships with all of them, and I think it's a fantastic place. But it's sort of no secret that the projects that we started while I was running the Smart City program and similar projects in other divisions, you know, we had stuff that wasn't related to smart cities in operations and management, all kinds of all over the place, that were also enabled by this concept of not being afraid to take risk. But many of those things that we envisioned 2-3 years ago are still on the drawing board today, even though they were feasible, even though there was budget, even though there was staff people. The week that I left, like 7 other people left, right? So you had this huge turnover problem, you know, and it really started at the leadership level. And I think the outcome of that is kind of unfortunate, because the staff people like me, I've gone on, I found other employment, things are fine. You know, I'm happy. But the citizens who live inside the city and depend on those city services are still waiting on the things that we identified as key needs 2-3 years ago. And I think that's somewhat unfortunate. And it's my message. The reason I bring this up is because I think that it's really easy to talk about successes. Lots of people talk about, you know, Matt did a fantastic job about talking about the successes of his program, and I absolutely applaud that. I think that's fantastic, and that definitely is the aspiration that everyone needs to head towards. But I think it's important for anybody who's in the trenches doing this kind of work, doing innovation work, GIS work, you know, IT, whatever it is, that you understand that success sometimes brings its own challenges, because I think there's an opportunity for people who are sort of where I was a couple of years ago with these great successes, but then some looming political clouds, to think more intelligently about how you manage not just the innovation work that you're doing, but also the political process that potentially follows. So a couple of lessons that I learned and I want to share with anybody who's in a similar position: build a broad coalition. So I made the mistake of relying really heavily on one executive leadership position, and we pushed pretty hard on some other departments. I'll be completely honest about that. We didn't think they were moving fast enough, and I don't think we were mean to anybody, but we leaned really hard on them, and we sort of made it difficult for them not to get on board and to at least try some things, and that didn't always go over super well. And so when my director that was sort of empowering this process, and this is something I didn't realize till after he'd left, but how much sort of animosity there was in a couple of places. And it was nothing that we couldn't have solved by doing a better job communicating with those other people about why we were trying to do the things that we wanted. It was, if I had done a better job in my role, sort of selling these innovations to other people across the city, I think that the program would have withstood the political turmoil much more effectively. The other thing is to manage politics early on. So understand that success comes with some political challenges. Know that going in. And while you are working through the process, be a little bit careful about who you give credit to, how things flow in terms of the benefits of the outcomes that you create. In our case, the last straw ended up being a news article that came out about a project that my director and I were working on that didn't mention the city manager as sort of having shepherded this program. And the city manager called in my director and said, "What's this article?" And the director said, "No, this is great. Like, look at this fantastic news that, coverage we're getting for the city." And the city manager said, "Yeah, but where's my name in this?" And that ended up being sort of a sticking point, and things unraveled very quickly after that. So understand that the people above you who have political considerations like that aren't necessarily doing it for the wrong reasons. I think in my case, there were some unfortunate reasoning behind some of that, but understand that, like, politicians have to get elected and they need community support in order to get reelected. And so that's going to be a primary concern of theirs. And if you want them to support your programs, the stuff that you do have to support them in their reelection efforts. And then the last thing was really a personal one for me. It was really interesting to me to see, like, from my vantage point now, a year out of this program, I went around and spent 2.5 years telling everybody that they needed to innovate and that there was these great big opportunities we could do if everybody would just be willing to change a little bit and be flexible with the stuff that they worked on. And then as the program started to change after the leadership turnover that we had, I really was caught off guard when I had one of my good friends inside the city, and he told me, you asked everybody else to change, but now that things have changed about the work that you do, you're not happy with it. And you have to understand that, like, this that you're feeling, this is what everybody else is going through when you were, had leadership support. And that really struck me because I think it's true. I think in the innovation space, a lot of times we're really comfortable pushing other people to change, but not necessarily as comfortable understanding that change sometimes applies to us. And if you want to survive in city government longer than I did, I think you're going to have to be able to sort of roll with the politics a little bit and be comfortable with those changes in a way that I probably wasn't until it was too late. So I'm going to stop there and turn my screen off here.
Thanks, Kjeld. That was very informational on that. You're right. There is a lot of risk involved. I mean, when you're in government, you're getting paid by tax dollars, and they expect certain things to happen as normal, as operational wise, and there's the CIP projects and all those things that tax dollars go into. And as a citizen, you want to make sure your tax dollars are being used efficiently and effectively, and so yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, that there is risk, and you need to have that safe barrier in order to run those risks and to run those programs to test whether something will be successful or not. And you kind of made another point too about having that coalition. You definitely need to have that executive buy-in, and then to have a committee that's more than just one, or more than just one manager, to reduce that risk, and to have that buffer and to get that buy-in. So Matt, how did you guys kind of venture around that risk arena in your city?
So our smart city team, the actual physical team, relatively new, and so they're still working on that process. They're building their initial playbook on how to move forward. So I'm going to take some of these notes for sure and share that with them. For us, we kind of took advantage of an opportunity where our organization was going through a bit of a reorganization. So we saw that was an opportunity to engage with new staff that were coming on board who were really looking for new ideas and innovations. So we started meeting with everybody. So I don't know if I guess we did kind of build that broad coalition by making sure that we were engaging with as much leadership as we could, as well as all the operating staff, to sort of show them what the potential was. Yeah, but I would agree that with success, there's challenges that come with that, and I think it's super important to really make those connections and bring everybody along with you.
And Toby, I'd like to add too that I hate to leave things on sort of a negative note, so I want to make sure that I leave everybody with the parting thought that I would absolutely do it again. I might do a few things a little bit differently, but without a doubt, 100%. Going back 3 years, would start right where I was, and we accomplished enough that it was well worth it. I think my message is more, it's not don't try or don't be afraid of these kinds of things. It's just understand that there's some risk involved and be okay with that, and accomplish as much as you can. And if you run out of steam, keep in mind that you may need a backup plan, because you are taking some risk, and that can sort of go either way. But it's 100% worth it, because the opportunities and the savings and the impact on citizens is so enormous that it's well worth the risk.
Yeah, it's really hard to gauge what the response is going to be to an innovative idea as well. Right?
Do you guys go through some sort of framework to decipher what initiatives you're going to take on? Because I mean, there may be like all kinds of different ideas coming from different places, whether it's from executives or from electeds, or just from your from your staff. How do you differentiate what you're going to put your time into?
So for us, we do have an intake process that wherever a new idea comes in, whether it's from the business, from our own team, from outside the organization, we do run it through that process, which brings it to our senior management level inside digital innovation and IT, to see how we can prioritize it and how it aligns with the corporate work plan and strategic initiatives.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good point. So we were kind of, I want to say I built my smart city backwards. So a lot of times you start with like a smart city team or some kind of a strategic initiative that comes from the council or something like that. And then you build like a top level structure, and then you build some programs that are going to fit under it, and you sort of run it the sort of traditional way. I built mine out of a project that already exists and already had funding. So we were off and running long before we had any kind of official buy-in to have a smart city project. And so then we had to kind of build it while we were flying it. It was very much like a Silicon Valley startup atmosphere running this kind of thing, and I think that's probably where some of the inherent risk that we took on, because we were so far out ahead doing some of the projects and implementing these things long before we thought to go and get buy-in. So towards the end, we had a committee. We were getting some buy-in across the departments. Project ideas came from trying to go out and look across these departments and find out what kinds of problems they were having that we could solve with the tools we were building. So we sort of got there in the end, but I think if we'd maybe done that a bit earlier, we might have been more successful long run.
You guys have any comments there, Tim?
Yeah, I got just a quick question, and this is kind of where we struggle with this. How do you go from, and we'll start with Matt, and I'd like Kjeld to both answer this. How do you go from buzz phrase, right? Everybody wants a smart city, everybody wants to be innovative, to actually doing stuff? I mean, it seems like, Matt, y'all done a fantastic job kind of really making some stride. And Kjeld, you did some good examples, but, is it, what gets you past, hey, this sounds like something good, and then where you actually have to deliver?
I guess I would say that maybe there's a balance. Some things you definitely follow the frameworks that are in place, right? You respect the methodologies and you know. But other times, I think you just have to you run with some ideas and you take those risks and you prototype and you experiment. I think it's important to experiment. You might not necessarily deploy that, but I think you have to take the time to do those rapid experiments and kind of like show it around a little bit, build some excitement. So maybe it's a little bit of both. Equal pressure on both the following frameworks and then experimenting and selling.
All right, Kjeld?
Yeah, I think that's right. Absolutely. In terms of the process, on the outcome side, so I mentioned not doing bolt-on innovation, but how do you get there? And I think it starts with trying to identify problems. So good ideas, new ideas are a dime a dozen. Everybody has 10 of them. I could, name off 5 right now. It's not really what's relevant. I think what's relevant is, in terms of application, is what kinds of problems are you solving? And I'm going to give a really quick example. So we had, we discovered that the #1 complaint coming in through the city's 311 app was that streetlights were burned out. So initially, the problem seemed to be we need to better communicate with the citizens around this. And so we thought, okay, let's improve the process. Let's build some tools where we can take a picture of the streetlight after it gets replaced or the bulb after it's changed. We can send that back through the app, and now citizens have some responsiveness around this problem reporting process. And we thought that was pretty cool. But then we started thinking a little bit deeper, and we realized that what's the real problem that these people are complaining about? Do they want to have to spend a lot of time thinking about how their streetlight got fixed, or would they just want the light on? So we ended up going with a pilot project to do some connected streetlights. We put sensors on them so we could tell when they were burned out. And the idea was, instead of improving the customer service process around this problem, let's eliminate the problem and do customer service sort of preemptively. And so I think I use that example because it's a way of sort of thinking deeper about the applications of what you're trying to do and try to understand what it is you're really trying to get at. So there's lots of buzzwords around IoT and all these, strategies, but what problem are you really solving? And do you need technology to do that? Sometimes it's a people problem. Maybe you need to hire differently or train differently, or you just need better customer service. So it's think about where you really want to end up. And a lot of times in these smart city programs, people start with the technology. I sat through maybe 200 pitches from vendors while I was running the smart city program, and they'd come in and they'd tell me all about how cool their company was and the amazing features of their products. And then I would ask them, yeah, but what does it do for my agency? And they couldn't answer that question most of the time. So don't start with solutions, start with problems.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because, even some of the solutions is a change in workflow. Some of the workflows are archaic, and it's not really a technical problem or a technology issue. It's a workflow issue. And, fixing those workflows is also considered innovative, as well. So it doesn't cost anything. It's just a way of changing the process.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Toby, and that's huge for GIS applications. So most of what we tried to do with GIS was around workflow improvements, and most of it cost very little. So like that $80,000 a year we had in staff efficiency savings cost us maybe $4,000 or $5,000 to implement, and that included buying like iPads for the field team. So lots of opportunities there, tons of them.
Right.
Yeah, look at what you've got already in-house, right? You've got access as GIS managers and GIS teams. We have so much technology probably. So just start using it and showing the value of it.
Yeah. Hey, Wade, do you have anything to add?
Well, I would just say that I'm really super impressed by what our presenters have shown us today. I think going back to my roots as a community development and a city planner type of person, I don't currently work for a municipality, but I kind of wish I was, so I could take some of these ideas. And what I appreciate with the content that was shared was that you really get this opportunity in your profession as a GIS professional to build a greater sense of community by virtue of your profession, your GIS tools, your data, and your understanding of how these tools and data can solve a problem, as Kjeld emphasizes, which I think is critical. Certainly, very beginning of the program is you have to apply that to an organization priority / problem. And then the other thing that I can really appreciate is that building on that success is you almost have to be prepared for that by virtue of having a structure inside like Matt's team, a way to vet the incoming proposals, what to choose to work on in terms of what offers the highest value. That it's really interesting to figure out, all right, GIS managers have this opportunity to be an innovator, but you almost want and need to have that executive support so somebody else can take the credit. You know, it's one thing that GIS people can do this, and they absolutely can, but you also have to recognize that we are business support people. We exist to make the organization successful, and making somebody else look good through the process, whether it's a department head, an elected official, to get somebody with executive sponsorship to kind of take the credit and help lead this group, I think is a pretty interesting thing to consider as you begin to venture down this road. So I just say kudos to you guys for presenting a very compelling story and a reason to leverage our profession in this way.
Yeah, definitely. That was a great insight there, Wade. You know, one of the things that I took out of this was definitely build some sort of coalition. You know, like Kjeld was saying, you know, have some sort of executive buy-in, some sort of committee to help vet what you're trying to accomplish, and make sure that everyone is all on board. Because as you can see, you know, just trying to do it all on your own, it's like pushing a rock up a hill. If you don't already have a project in place, you know, that's asking for it for sure. Like I said, manage those politics early. I think by, you know, having that coalition that helps manage those politics, it definitely will keep you out of the fire in that way. And empathy of change, because a lot of people aren't used to dealing with change and they're comfortable in what they're doing. But have empathy in that you are disrupting, you know, whether it's good or bad, you know, but have empathy that people are going to have to change to do in doing the things that they were normally doing before. Whether it's a workflow or by technology. So those are some of the takeaways I had out of that, and definitely, you know, work with the multiple departments. Like Matt, you're doing a great job in bringing multiple departments, especially with your strategic communications department. I think that's huge to be able to communicate what you're trying to accomplish, get that out to the community, get people utilizing your applications or utilizing your open data, which just kind of keeps getting fuel to your program, to your process. So I really appreciate all that you guys have presented here. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your effort. I think there's a lot of great takeaways out of this. You guys have any last comments before we go? Because
we're at that time.
Yeah.
I just want thanks to the team here for having us on here, and thanks to Kjeld for sharing your insight. It was great.
Yeah, likewise. Really had fun doing this, and I want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable reaching out. I'm all over LinkedIn, and you can get my contact information from Toby, and I'm happy to answer questions. Now that I've left the organization, I'm sort of I have some freedom to talk really honestly about the process and both the successes and the challenges that we had, and I'm more than happy to do that. And any advice or anything I can give to anybody, I'm happy to help.
Yeah, Kjeld, don't hold back, man. Don't hold back.
No, it's it's a fantastic organization, but unfortunately the program didn't grow wings the way I'd hoped it would. So
yeah, it's all good. You know, we're all learning. You know, it's not something that we're when we got into GIS, that was something that we initially thought we would be doing, you know. So whatever lessons learned is great, you know, for especially those that are just venturing into this arena. So one last thing, the winner of the gaining access to the how to take your team from good to great, the winner is Tony Semenel. He is the West Virginia State GIS coordinator. So congratulations. And
Congrats.
of course starts February 1st. And so we'll add you to the list.
Very good.
All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thanks for your time. I know we went a little bit over, but I think it was well worth going over because there's so much information to be garnered from today's webinar. The tale of two GIS smart cities.
All right.
And,
thanks everybody out there.
we will have this on YouTube shortly. And if you want to get notified of future GIS Peer Success webinars, go to GISSuccess.com and sign up to the newsletter. So everybody, thank you. Thank you for your time and have a great day. And we will catch you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.